The street you are walking on is not a street. It is a river, and you just stepped in it. Not water, not mud. Something thicker. Something that has been building up since before you were born, layer by layer, season by season. The cobblestones beneath your feet disappeared under it weeks ago. You don't look down anymore. You learned not to. Welcome to Europe, 1200s. You live here. This is your city. And this morning, like every morning, you have to get through it. Let's start with the moment you wake up. You open your eyes. The room is cold. The fire burned low overnight. Around you, bodies are still sleeping. Your family. Maybe a neighbor's family too. Because in winter, shared heat is survival. The smell in the room is thick. Every breath exhaled through the night is still here, trapped inside these walls with you. In the corner, there's a wooden bucket. Round, handled, heavy. Everyone used it through the night. It is full. You pick it up. You walk to the window. You push it open. Cold air hits your face. You look down at the street below, and you shout 2 words. Gardez l'eau. Watch out for the water. You pour. A wet, muffled sound rises from below. You close the window. You go about your morning. Here is something worth knowing. That phrase, Gardez l'eau, traveled into English over the following centuries. It shifted, shortened, changed shape the way words do when they cross languages. And it became the word loo, the word millions of people use today to mean toilet. The trace of that morning pour is still living inside the English language. Every time someone in London says they are going to the loo, they are, without knowing it, echoing a medieval warning shouted from an upstairs window into a filthy street 800 years ago. Now step outside. Stop at the doorway for a moment. Before you move, breathe. When you walk out onto a modern city street, what do you smell? Exhaust fumes, maybe. Coffee from a nearby shop. Sometimes nothing at all. When you step out of your door in a European city in the 1200s, the smell hits you like a physical object. Travelers wrote about it constantly. In journals and letters from this period, it comes up the same way every time. The smell of the city reaches you before you can see it. Merchants on horseback reported smelling Paris, or London an hour's ride from the gates. Their horses pulled back. The animals knew before the riders did. You don't notice it. You were born here. To you, this is just air. But let's name what is in that air. Animal dung from the horses, pigs, donkeys, chickens, and cattle that share these streets with you. Rotting meat from the butcher's stalls. Outside the tanning workshops, open vats of human urine sit in the street. Because urine softens animal hides, and the tanners need it by the barrel. People sell their urine. There is a market for it. And running down the center of the street, an open channel carries everything the city produces. Rainwater, kitchen waste, the contents of every bucket poured from every window since dawn. Slaughterhouse blood. All of it moving in the same direction. All of it the same color by afternoon. In summer, flies gather above these channels in clouds thick enough to cast shadows. In winter, the surface freezes. When spring comes, what thaws reveals exactly what winter was hiding. You walk past it every day. This is not misery to you. This is simply Tuesday. Paris had a street called Rue Merde, another called Rue du Pipi. These are not jokes. These are official names, recorded in medieval city documents, named for what was most visible on them. By the early 14th century, so much waste had collected in the streets of Paris that the city was forced to pass laws requiring citizens to clean the area directly in front of their own homes. Not the whole street, just the part in front of your door. That was considered progress. The Seine River ran through the center of Paris. The city drank from it. The city also emptied into it. The same water that carried waste from the morning buckets upstream was drawn back by bucket downstream for drinking and cooking. The people of Paris understood, vaguely, that the river was unclean. They tried to collect from points upstream of the main outflows. They were not always successful. Now let's talk about what happened when you actually needed to go. If you lived in a city in the 1200s, you had several options. None of them were good. The first option was the bucket in your room. You already know about this one. The second was the cesspit. Most homes in larger cities had one. A deep hole dug beneath or beside the house, sometimes lined with stone, often not. The household's waste dropped into this pit through a wooden seat or chute. When the pit filled, every year or two, it had to be emptied. The third option was the public latrine. London, towards the end of the 1300s, had 16 public latrines for a population of 30,000 people. 16. You do the arithmetic. Lines formed. People gave up and went elsewhere. Elsewhere meant the street, the alley, the space behind the market stalls. And then there was the option available only to the wealthy, the garderobe. Carved into the outer wall of a castle or manor house, the garderobe was a small chamber jutting outward, open at the bottom. You sat. You did what you needed to do. The waste dropped straight down into the moat below. The name garderobe means wardrobe in Old French, and that name was not an accident, because hanging directly above the toilet opening in that same small room were the household's finest garments. Velvet, embroidered wool, the best clothes the family owned, suspended above a hole that dropped into accumulated waste. The reason was practical. The ammonia fumes rising from below killed the moths and lice that lived in fabric. It worked. The clothes stayed clean. Medieval dry cleaning was conducted directly above the castle toilet. In summer, when the wind came from the wrong direction, even the wealthiest families could smell what had built up at the base of their walls. They closed the shutters. It did not fully help, but they were not complaining, because the alternative was a bucket poured from a window. Even in the most intimate matters, class made itself known. Here is the question no one likes to think about. You have done what you needed to do. Then what? Today, the answer takes less than 10 seconds. In the 1200s, the answer depended entirely on who you were and where you were standing. If you were wealthy, you might have a piece of soft wool nearby. Fine linen. If you were ordinary, you used what was available. Moss, broad leaves, hay, a smooth stone. The season determined the options. In winter, when the ground was frozen and leaves were gone, options narrowed considerably. The Romans had developed a more systematic solution, the tersorium. A long stick with a sea sponge fixed to the end, kept in salted water or vinegar. You used it. You rinsed it. The next person used it. Everyone in the public latrine used the same sponge, the same stick, soaking between uses in water that was changed, if you were lucky, once a day. By the 1200s, even this solution had been largely forgotten. Whatever was nearby, that was the answer. And it didn't always do the job. Now meet the people who dealt with the consequences. They were called Gong farmers, or Nightmen. Both names tell you something about what they did and when they were allowed to do it. The law in most cities was clear. Gong farmers could not be seen working during daylight hours, the city did not want to see them. So they began their work after dark, in London, between 9 in the evening and 5 in the morning, and they finished before the city woke up. They descended into the cesspits beneath the city's homes, waist deep, sometimes chest deep, sometimes deeper. Long-handled wooden shovels, leather buckets. In darkness, while the city slept above them, they worked. The waste was loaded onto carts and driven beyond the city walls before dawn. They were paid well by the standards of the time. At Hampton Court, Gong farmers working for the royal household earned 6pence a day. The market rate in the late 1400s was 2 shillings per ton of waste removed. The money was not the problem. The problem was invisible. Inside a cesspit that has been accumulating waste for months, gas builds up. Methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide. You cannot see these gases. A man who descended into a deep cesspit could lose consciousness within a few breaths. By the time the men at the surface noticed something was wrong, it was already too late. These deaths were recorded. They were considered an occupational hazard. In 1326, a Gong farmer named Richard the Raker descended into a cesspit in London to carry out his work. The wooden ceiling of the pit had rotted through. It gave way beneath him. He fell into the waste below and drowned. His name is in the historical record. That is the only reason we know he existed. He descended into the filth of a city every night so that the city could pretend the filth did not exist. And he died in it. And the city moved on. Think about that the next time you flush. Now let's go inside the body. When archaeologists excavate toilet pits from this period, the results are consistent. Nearly everyone alive in a European city in the 1200s was carrying intestinal parasites. Whipworm, roundworm, tapeworm. Not some people. Not poor people. Nearly everyone. These parasites work in silence. They live in the intestines. They absorb what you eat before you can. They take the iron from your food. They take the vitamins. The result, across a lifetime of infection, is chronic anemia. Constant fatigue with no clear cause. Children who grow more slowly than they should. A bloated stomach was not a medical complaint in this era. It was just what stomachs looked like. Contaminated water carried worse. Dysentery killed within days through dehydration. Historians note that medieval armies consistently lost more men to dysentery than to combat. The enemy that destroyed more armies than any opposing general was invisible, traveled in water, and had no interest in treaties. There was also ergotism, a fungus that grew on rye. The grain most of the population depended on for bread, produced a toxin that caused hallucinations, convulsions, and the progressive death of tissue in the extremities. Fingers turned black. Limbs fell away. Communities that experienced outbreaks had no understanding of the cause. They called it St. Anthony's fire. They prayed. The rye grew the same fungus the following season. On the skin, lice and fleas were not a mark of poverty. They existed across every social class. The castle and the cottage shared the same parasites. Wounds from constant scratching, with no antibiotics, became infected. Infected wounds became gangrenous. A scratch was not a minor thing in the 1200s. A scratch was a potential death sentence. Picture what that body felt like from the inside. Parasites in the gut, infections on the skin, contaminated food in the stomach, the immune system never at rest, never recovering, just fighting. A person in their 30s in this era was not old. but their body had been through more than most modern people experience in a full lifetime. But people did wash. This is important to say. In Paris, in 1292, there were 26 public bathhouses operating under guild oversight, open every day except religious holidays, serving a population of approximately 200,000 people. The church had never formally banned bathing. Physicians recommended it. Medical texts advise bathing once every 2 weeks at minimum. The problem was not the desire to bathe. The problem was everything else. Consider the journey. You walk through those streets to reach the bathhouse. By the time you arrive, your shoes have collected what the streets contain. You step into the water. But dozens of people have bathed in the same tub since morning. The water changes color by midday. By the time you step in, visibility is zero. You wash. You get out. You walk home through the same streets. For those washing at home, the process was even harder. Water carried from the well, bucket by bucket, heated over a fire. The family bathed in sequence in the same wooden barrel. With each person, the water became less effective. By the time the last family member stepped in, what surrounded them had already been used by everyone before them. Laundry happened at the river. Women gathered at the banks with the household's clothes. No soap for most people. Instead, lye water. Oak ash dissolved in hot water over several days until the liquid became caustic enough to strip grease from fabric. The clothes were soaked, laid on flat stones, and beaten with wooden paddles. The hands of the women who did this work were raw, cracked, permanently reddened from hours in cold water and alkaline solution. On every head, beneath every layer of clothing, on every member of every household, lice. The fine-toothed bone comb was a daily tool. You combed. You caught some. Not all of them. Never all of them. The lice came back because they were everywhere. In the bedding, in the walls. Cutting your hair eliminated the problem. But for women especially, cutting your hair was a social statement as much as a practical decision. Hair was identity. Hair was honor. Most women chose the daily fight with the comb. Here's what all of this was building toward. Not in 1200. Not yet. But within a few generations, everything you have just walked through, the contaminated water, the shared cesspits, the rats that lived alongside the human waste, the bodies weakened by decades of parasites, all of it was constructing the conditions for something that would kill between a third and half of every person alive in Europe. The Black Death arrived in 1347. It found a population that was already compromised, already fighting, already losing ground on a dozen invisible fronts simultaneously. The filth did not cause the plague, but the filth is what made the plague so total. You walk back through the door at the end of the day. Your legs are heavy, your feet are wet. You eat from the communal pot. You sit near the fire. The warmth is real, and it is enough. Night comes. The bucket goes back to the corner. In the morning, it will go to the window again. You have not complained once today. This life is not a tragedy to you. You have no other life to compare it to. There is no running water in your future. No flush toilet around the corner. No antibiotic waiting for the scratch that will become infected next month. This is simply how things are. And you are living it fully without knowing what you are missing. This morning, you woke up and used the bathroom. Hot water came from a tap. Soap was beside the sink. Paper was in its place. You washed your hands in 30 seconds and did not think about it once. They thought about it every single day. where to empty the bucket, whether the cesspit had overflowed again, whether there would be anything other than frozen ground and dead leaves when they needed to go in the field. An entire life. Every day. Just this. No warning. No escape. No second choice. Just the bucket in the corner and the window above the street. If you had been born into a European city in the 1200s, what do you think would have been the hardest thing to adjust to? Not the smell. You would not have noticed the smell. Not the cold. You would have been used to that too. What would have broken you? Tell us in the comments. And if this journey added something to you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because there are other stories waiting for you in every corner of the past. See you in the next one.